Zero mark here. Two parts to the video today. First, a preview of Fennec Fright Fest. We're going to take a look at that event and take a look at the event deck for that. And then in the second half, I'm going to talk about the arena event because that was a disaster, and I want to just give my kind of overall take and opinion on it. So let's look at Fennec Fright Fest and what's different. So we're back to a Slayer event. This is a standard Slayer event, except for they're adding a new type of boss in here. They're adding a special haunted boss, which has a large participation limit, which sounds kind of like the old world bosses that they used to have. But we'll have to see how that gets implemented and how that works. And then they've got all these Fennecs showing up, which is something that's apparently before my time, because I don't understand the fascination with Fennecs, but apparently there's a long-standing thing in Legendary going back about that. But other than that, it seems to be a pretty standard Slayer event, which is nice. After the arena event, we'll get something that's actually maybe fun to play. So let's take a look at the event deck. This is a very interesting event deck this week. So if we look at the main event card, we'll see that the main event card in this particular event is actually pretty powerful, because its battle skill is to create one Firepower Gem 1 plus 1 for every additional 10 stacks of special intensity. That means if you have 200 stacks of special intensity, you're going to be creating 20 Firepower Gem 1s. By the time you've gotten 350 special intensity, you're going to be filling the entire 35 gem board with Firepower Gem 1s, which means you'd be upgrading any other ones that were there. So pretty soon into a battle, you're going to be filling the entire board with Firepower Gem 1s from this guy's skill. That's pretty good. It's not limited, so if you have 1,000 stacks of special intensity, you're going to be creating 100 Firepower Gem 1s, which you're going to create Firepower Gem 1s and then upgrade those Power Gem 1s to Power Gem 2s and so forth and so on. So by the time you get your intensity high enough, you could be filling the entire board with Power Gem 4s just from this guy's one skill alone. So by the time you put 2 of these or 3 of these into your deck, then you can use them in alternate turns and have multiple turns where you're doing huge amounts of damage. Because you do see a 7-turn cooldown, so this guy does take a while to use. So you use once and then you have to wait a while to use them again. But if you have multiple copies in your deck, there's going to come a time when you don't need to be using all of them on the same turn. You can be using them on consecutive turns and get lots and lots of really, really big hits in a row. So that's a pretty good card for an event deck. It also has a passive that gives it a boost to HP. So if you awaken this guy a little bit, and he's going to have a massive HP level. So that's a pretty decent card for the main event card. Let's look at the rest of the collection cards. The X13 we can't look at right now because they haven't given us the opportunity to. Every time I tap on it, it doesn't do anything. But according to the network chat and forum, the X13 is an upgraded version of the main event card. So the main event card says creates 1 Firepower Gem 1 plus 1 for every additional 10 stacks of special intensity. The X13 creates 1 Firepower Gem 2 plus 1 for every additional 10 stacks. So that one just gets you there even faster. So a couple of X13s, if you have an X13, you can just use it and get a massive hit. And then if you have multiple of them, you're going to be using them kind of every turn to get pretty big damage. So those are pretty good cards to get both of them in a deck. To get an X13 and a main, if you're using them at the same time, you'd very quickly fill up the board with Power Gem 3s or 4s. If you use them on consecutive turns, you can get multiple turns of really big hits. So that's some flexibility that's nice and seems to be pretty good. So let's look at the support hero for this deck. Support hero battle skill is heal and dispel all buffs on enemies. So if that enemy has might, or it has thorns, or it has any of those buffs, you can dispel it with this card, which is hugely useful. So it has a counter skill to counter drain, But if you use its battle skill, it can debuff anything. So that's pretty useful. It's passive. Every other turn creates 4 fire gems and 1 firepower gem 1 and increases intensity. So that's pretty good that you get some gems kind of every other turn just to keep you going until your 7 turns run out and you can run off your main event card again. But that's not a bad card. It's got the heal in there, which is going to help out. It's got the dispel, which could be hugely helpful. And it's got the passive that's going to give you stuff in the meantime, so you don't have to just waste 7 turns waiting for your main event hero to power up again. So let's look at the ultra rare. This is an interesting deck this week, and this is what makes it interesting. If you look at this ultra rare, it's the support card just buffed. So it heals for 520% of recovery instead of 300 and dispels all debuffs on enemies. And then it creates 5 power gems and 3 firepower gem 1s every 2 turns. So it's just an upgraded version of the support card. So if you don't get the ultra rare, no big loss. You can use the support card and it does the same thing. It's a little bit, I mean, the ultra rare is definitely better, right? 520% is better than 300%. 3 firepower gem 1s is better than 1 power gem 1, right? And then it has this extra passive that if there's 25 power gems on the board, you get enraged for 3 turns, increasing special attack. So when you use your main hero to dump massive amounts of power gem 1s on the board, this is then going to buff the attack of all of your heroes like crazy. Right, so that extra piece that really buffs the attack will make it kind of do incrementally more damage. But if you don't have the ultra rare, the deck will still function because the support hero is the ultra rare hero just without that attack buff. Now, putting the ultra rare in is going to make your deck do massively more damage. But if you have 1 or 2 support heroes and 3 main or X13 cards, you're going to have a pretty strong deck. And if you can get those main event heroes, relatively cheaply from the pack or from the event, then you could have a really, really good deck without having to chase the ultra rare. So this could be a pretty good deck for a free-to-play player if you get kind of lucky in pulling an event hero pretty quickly and you get an event hero from the pull in the event. And then if you get super lucky and all of your runes fall right and you get an X13, you could have a really, really good deck without too much effort. The key is it's driven by special intensity, right? So you're going to need to be building intensity, and the intensity is going to be built mainly from your relics. So you're going to want to have 3 to 4 to 5 relics to really boost this deck and get the best out of it. So you're going to have to look through your relics and see if you have any that generate special intensity. And if you do, then maybe you can put some of those in. Otherwise, you're going to need to get a bunch from this event. So you'll probably need to get 3 or more from this event, which means that you're going to be spending 10,000 plus gems on relics, unless you get super lucky. But maybe if you get lucky on the other stuff, there's a way to a really powerful deck this week that's not going to cost you 50 or 60,000 gems. There's a route to it that costs you 10 to 15. You'd still have to get lucky, of course. So interesting in that this deck only really has 2 cards. It has 2 base cards and then 2 buffed versions of those base cards. The other thing that's interesting about this deck is you'll notice at the top it says Warrior Special Cursed. It's got the 2 different types. It's got Special and it's got Cursed. But if you read all of the cards, everything that it looks at says Special Intensity. So there's no Cursed Intensity anywhere. So these really look like special cards. And then I'm not sure when the Cursed is going to kind of come into play. But all of the skills of all of the cards in this deck are based off of Special Intensity. So it looks to be an interesting deck. I mean, it's basic. It's only 2 cards. So it's not that complicated. I would say the best deck is probably 1 support and 4 X13s. And any of the X13s can be swapped out with event cards, and any of the support cards can be switched out with the ultra rares because they're just the same card buffed. So that's my take on this event deck. Looks kind of interesting to me. Maybe worth chasing if you get lucky. And hopefully it works pretty well in this Slayer event and lets you do things pretty quick and do some seriously big damage. So that's the new Fennec deck, Fennec Fright Fest deck, I also want to touch on the arena, because we just had the arena, and it was pretty much a colossal failure. It was broken on multiple levels in multiple different ways, and the stuff coming out of Network these days is even acknowledging that it was a colossal disaster and quite a mess, and even them trying to put the best spin possible on it still makes it sound like pretty much a colossal failure. So I was thinking about it in terms of, yes, every individual piece of the event was broken. You didn't have enough keys. You didn't have enough coins at first. Then you had too many coins and no keys. And the PvP system was kind of a mess. There was a bunch of stuff that just was wrong with this event. And so I was thinking about it and wondering, is this event fatally flawed and something that should just be scrapped? Or is there something at the base of this that there's actually a good event in here, and if you tweak it and you change it and you make a few adjustments, that you could turn this into something useful? Or is it something that just should be kind of thrown in the trash and forgotten about and never ever brought up again? So in that regard, I was thinking about, what's the underlying structure of the event? What's the underlying structure of all the events? Commander events are kind of about the individual grind. Like, you just are fighting your own bosses, and you're fighting them for as long as you want, as one of my guild members said, until your eyes bleed. You can just fight boss after boss after boss on your own. And remember, the design team did make some good changes on that. They maybe went too far with changing the boss cap to level 500, but they made some good changes with the overkill in that, and with allowing you to choose your map at the beginning that actually improved the event quite a bit. So Commander's about solo bashing. There's guild bosses in there too, so you can coordinate with your guild and get some stuff there. But the guild stuff is all going towards solo trophies. The guild score in Commander is just the sum of solo trophies. Slayer event is much more kind of time management. There's hundreds of bosses being thrown at you. There's bosses being killed every second. You've got to manage keys. You've got to manage time. You've got to decide whether it's worth going and trying to get to the 15% threshold to get the key, or whether you just tag it and move on. And there's actually strategy in how you deal with all of those things and decide which bosses are worth spending keys on and which ones aren't. And it's an interesting thing. And then there's also a guild boss component of that. And the guild bosses in Slayer actually have separate guild trophies that you earn. And so there's a sense of, you can work on the guild bosses to really benefit your guild, and they don't benefit your solo score as much. Or you can kind of work on all of your solo bosses, and so there's also some trade-off there. And it really works. I think the Slayer event is a lot of fun. So the arena event was then very different. So instead of kind of a guild-based or a world-based, community-based event of killing bosses, or Commander, which is a completely solo-based killing bosses, Arena was based on PvP. And yes, it had the guild boss component to it, but all the other ones do too. The guild boss component they totally broke by using the coin system, which is bad, and then putting the participation caps on it was just a horrific idea. I don't know how that got past anybody. That was just the most terrible idea ever. But that could be changed, right? You change it to 30 and that problem goes away. You fix the coin system, you give people more keys, you can fix that. That's not a problem. Then it's just guild bosses, and people can kill guild bosses when they want to and as much as they want to. The key part of the event is PvP, and it was based on the previous PvP system that they had in place. And inherently, as an underlying concept, having a PvP event makes sense. And having it be a full event in the full rotation could work. The caveat being that you have to have a PvP system that works and is interesting and is good before you can base an entire event on it. And they'd been toying around with PvP, using it as a 2-day event in between other events, and it wasn't working, and nobody liked it, and the ranking system was off, and the matching system was off, and the whole thing was just kind of off. And so then when they just took it full form like that and dumped it into event and added one more wrinkle onto it that made it even worse, I'm talking about the barrier stuff with the mages that just made things even worse, made the balance even more broken. You can't do that, and that's why the event was so terrible. mean, so PvP is broken on so many levels. The first was the matching. You could be at the first floor of Tower 1 and match somebody that you have absolutely no chance of beating, who has power level 3-4 times yours, that's just an absolute killer deck that you can't do anything with on the first floor of the first tower. And at the same time, at the top floor of the 10th tower, you might find somebody who's totally weak. And there's no rhyme nor reason to how difficult the next fight is going to be. So you have just no idea. And you can skip somebody and get somebody that's equally as powerful or even more powerful. And it's totally random. And so you don't feel like you're progressing. It feels like it's just this random crapshoot of what you're going to get. And that is frustrating and demoralizing, especially when you're on a low-level tower and constantly getting people that you just have no chance of beating. There needs to be some sort of more progression-based something to that. So it was just bad matching system. They need to figure out how to deal with that. Beyond matching, look at the leaderboard down here, the Coliseum leaderboard. I came in 2,332nd out of 128,000 people. Okay, so that means that there was 126,000 people below me. Well, this is curious because look at this. Look at what my score was for the arena. I had 1,300 points. So if there are 126,000 people that have fewer points than I do, so less than 1,306, that means that there's approximately 100 people that are sharing every score. You can already see everybody on this page has the same score, right? The 1,306. Well, if I scroll up to where the cutoff is between the next reward tier, because 100 people are sharing every score, look at that. You've got people on both sides of the reward cutoff that have the same score, and multiple people on both sides of the cutoff that have the same score. Okay, well, that's just one cutoff. Let's see what happens when we get to the other cutoffs. And yes, I got to scroll a ways down here, so it's going to take me a second, but let's look at what happens at the next cutoff about people's scores. Oh, look at that. You've got people on both sides of that cutoff that have the same score. You're going to have this all the way down at every cutoff because you're averaging 100 people having the same score on every score. It's a broken ranking system. Like you have to fix that. I don't know how you fix it, but that's just completely broken. That you could have people that are earning the same score getting different rewards. That's just broken. Like there were so many pieces of this event that were like that were just broken, that you've got to do some serious thinking about this event before you put it back in place. So my take on the arena was the underlying concept of a PvP event is not broken. It's potentially a useful thing. There are some people who always like PvP more than others. It's not my thing. I generally don't like PvP. But some people like Slayer events better than Commander events and vice versa. And there would be some people that would really love a PvP event. The problem is you have to have a working and functional PvP system before you bring in an entire event based on it. So until they get that fixed, I would hope that they would retire the arena, bring PvP back as the between event thing for a couple of days until you can actually fix it and make it so that people are saying, oh, this is actually better and is actually kind of working. So I'm really hoping that I know that the event this weekend will be much better and much more fun than last weekend. So I really hope that you have a lot of fun with the Fennec Fright Fest. I hope you get a little bit lucky and pull a couple of cards and are able to put together a great deck. So until next time.